Hello. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for being here today. I'm Lisa Malora, Chief of Staff to President Mary Papazian. Here at San Jose State University, we encouraged people to be curious, to challenge their assumptions, and to discover new ideas. One of the things I love most about being part of a university community is seeing the look of surprise on a student's face when discovering something new. A new work of art, a new research finding that is groundbreaking. One of our neighbors in Santa Clara County would call those moments of surprise and delight. These are moments that wow us, that bring us to the edges of our seats, that stay in our memories. This event promises to be one of those moments. Today, we have the special privilege of participating in a dialogue moderated by President Mary Papazian with two world leaders. Malala Yousafzai, Nobel Peace Prize laureate, founder of the Malala Fund, and internationally acclaimed advocate for girls' education around the world. And Tim Cook, CEO of Apple. We'll learn more about our guests and their partnership in a moment. To start us off, I'd like to share this video about the Malala Fund's inspiring mission.
I have traveled the world and met many people in many countries, and I've seen firsthand many problems that we are facing today: war, economic instability, climate change, and health crises. And I can tell you that the answer is girls. I stand with girls as someone who knows how it feels to have the right of education taken away and your dreams threatened. When women are educated, there are more jobs for everyone. When mothers can keep their children alive and send them to school, there is hope. Education can transform communities, countries, and our world. We can gain peace, grow economies, improve our public health, and the air we breathe. When future generations read about us in their books or on their iPads, I don't want them to be shocked that 130 million girls could not go to school and we did nothing. Let the future generations say, we were the ones who stood up. Let them say, we were the first to live in a world where all girls could learn and lead without fear. Let us be the ones who bring that change we want to see.
Please join me in welcoming to the stage Malala Yousafzai, Tim Cook, and Mary Papazian.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think they were happy to see you.
Was
Was that a good wow moment? Yes. It was a good wow moment. So it is a pleasure to welcome both of you here to San Jose State, Malala and Tim. You have done extraordinary work to empower women around the globe, and recognizing that change happens, as Robert Kennedy said, by one ripple in a pond that spreads outward over and over until we can finally see the impact. tell us a little bit about how you came together, how your partnership, which I understand started in 2018, really developed. So I'll start with you, Tim, and then Malala.
Yeah, sure. I was at Oxford for a incubator kind of unveiling. And I was very excited about being there, and I knew Malala was going to school there, and so I reached out to Malala to see if she would take a meeting. And I was very fortunate that she took the meeting, and from that moment I decided we should be working with Malala. And so that's how it all started.
Yes, similar story. I was very busy and I took time out of my very busy schedule. I'm kidding, no. I was very excited to hear about Tim being in Oxford, and that was like the first time we were meeting, and I was, you are just curious and nervous about, how you can work together. And when I met Tim, it was, I felt that Tim understood the cause of education and empowerment of women and girls, and I did not need to do much to convince Tim that it is important and that it requires investment. So it was a great positive meeting, and I was very happy that Tim, I think you prefer to take action quickly. So I think after 2 months or something, we made a trip to Lebanon and we visited the projects that Malala Fund were supporting. We met girls there, and we announced our partnership together to work on girls' education.
Well, and it's not every day that a student gets a call like that. I hope you didn't miss too much class. But it is the British system, so they're not in class all the time, so that helps.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about the values, though, behind this partnership. It's one thing to say there's a need, there's 130 million girls out there, but talk specifically about the real values that you think aligned with you, Malala, and with Tim.
Yeah, so the government sector and the NGO sector has been focusing on education and other social causes, but we all have our own expertise, and we all should appreciate what we know and what we don't know. And I was really glad that to work with a company like Apple, who have a lot of expertise, and to work together with them to bring in their ideas, their sense of approaching such a problem, and it's incredible since we have been working with Apple to come up with solutions and to come up with how we can use technology and apps to engage the champions that we are supporting and the activists we are supporting who are working for girls' education. The values and the expertise of businesses community working together with the government and the NGO sector can actually help us to reach that a transformative change, and I'm glad that we are on the right path in that.
And speak about how this fits into Apple's culture, Tim.
Yeah, for us, when Steve founded the company, he initially said, education is a key market for us, and his vision was to get a computer in every classroom. And that vision expanded dramatically from that point, but education is deeply embedded in Apple's DNA. We've always believed that education is a great equalizer of people, and that if you can fix that one, a lot of other issues fall on the wayside. And so, when I talked to Malala and she talked about 130 million girls that weren't being able to go to secondary school, and the cost of that, and just the fact from the injustice of it all, and the fact that if you focused on girls and the family, the whole family benefits in a significant way. It's an exponential kind of benefit. And so education is deeply embedded in our values. We're very focused on climate change as well. I'm sure some of the folks in the audience are as well. We're focused on human rights. We're focused on privacy and accessibility of our products. But education in particular, if you look at a lot of the issues the world faces today, fundamentally education would fix a lot of these. And so that's how it's embedded with us.
Yeah, and this whole relationship between education and technology is certainly one I'd like to explore in a moment. But I'd like, before we get into that, Malala, I'd really like to think a bit about the traditional approach to educational change with NGOs and governments, and why it's so important to bring in business. Because so much historically has been done through NGOs and government entities, but working with Apple, you're really bringing in that business voice. How does that make a difference?
Well, in many ways, in the business sector, you have different opinions, different expertise, and when you are sitting on a table where a decision is made and where plans are made about bringing a change, and when you have more diversity and inclusivity on that table, it leads to better outcomes and better decisions. And I think that's the goal, that when business sector engages, we hope to reach out to better outcomes for any social change that we want to see. In the business sector, first is the expertise in technology that we really appreciate, and that Tim and his office have already helped us at Malala Fund for just like a small thing, like we are supporting activists in Nigeria, in Pakistan, in Afghanistan. They're working locally on the secondary education of girls, but there is lack of a safe app through which they can communicate and connect with each other, and that's something that we are working on, to find a safe zone for these activists to help each other, to support each other, to guide each other in the activism for girls' education. And these are the small things that, with the help of just one app, can actually help this whole network of people in their activism. And that's just one simple example. So the expertise of technology, the expertise of education, all these things come in hand, and I'm glad that we see more and more businesses taking interest in the issue of education, climate change, environment. So I think we're heading in the right direction.
Right. And it's really interesting. I mean, you see all of these students here at San Jose State right in front of you, and many of them are involved in developing those kinds of applications. But what's so wonderful about our students, I'm just going to do a shameless plug here, is that they do it based on their own experiences, really solving a real problem that people feel that needs to be done to make the experience in their community a little bit better. Could be around healthcare as well, and I imagine some of your work in education also goes into that healthcare space. But if you have those experiences, you're going to make more useful kinds of solutions. Tim, I don't know how you're seeing that in the development of products with Apple.
Well, no reason to make a plug, first of all. I have great respect for this university and the diversity and inclusion of the university, and the fact that you've led it is incredible. But for technology in the classroom, there's a lot further we can go. Maybe that's the best way to put it. It's very uneven currently. Accessibility is uneven, but even beyond accessibility, you also have some people use it in a non-integrated way into teaching, and so you see students mainly browsing and doing messaging and these kind of things, and not that those things aren't important, but now there's hundreds of thousands of education apps out there, and so it's great to integrate these into the learning process. And so we've tried to focus on bringing coding skills to everyone. We think that everyone should learn to code before they graduate, not because everyone should be a computer scientist, but because software is touching all of us all day long at this point, and it's a core skill for the future, just like mathematics is and other languages are.
Yeah, and I think as we think about technology and education, really there is so much out there, and you're working with it in all of these projects, Malala, around the world. To have the role perhaps of universities and professors and students engaging in actually assessment of some of that and thinking about whether or not it's really aligned with the future of learning and the way students learn or the different ways that students learn. And I'm curious, Malala, as you're working with different populations of girls around the world, what are you seeing in terms of technology's ability to reach different kinds of students coming from different backgrounds?
We work in different parts in different regions, and in some areas it's very difficult for girls to reach to their schools because of the distance, because of lack of transport. And I think technology can act as a resource at home for girls to have access to their education. One of the projects that we are supporting in Lebanon, they're using these smaller devices called tabshura, and you can have access to it. It works without electricity, and it can have all the content that you need to catch up for your learning. And girls, especially the Syrian refugee girls, they have promoted that device for their education, and they're also promoting it on the national level in Lebanon as well. So it's these sort of technology that can actually transform the way of learning. And I think technology is changing at a very faster rate, so we have to sort of update ourselves and update our education system for that. But in some areas where we have taken it for granted that education is literally impossible, like in refugee camps or in rural areas, how can we use technology to make it easier for ourselves to address these issues?
And even in some of these areas, doesn't everyone have a cell phone?
Yeah, cell phone it's reaching kind of every corner of the world now. So it's time that we use these devices for the good and for the learning and education.
Yeah. So, tech companies can be a force then for incredible good. The development of these kinds of approaches, ways to bring down the disparities, to create access where there wasn't any before. But we all also, as citizens of the world, were aware that there's been a lot of criticism, that there's been negatives to the way tech has sometimes impacted it. From small things like students or young people not being able to connect with each other anymore, living in this sort of social media world, to questions of privacy and other things that you had described, Tim, a little bit earlier. Tell me, how do you see, Tim, really thinking about using technology for good, and how can we do that while protecting against some of these potential negative trends?
I think it's important to understand that technology itself doesn't want to be good. It doesn't want to be bad either. It's solely in the creator's hands about whether technology is made for good or for evil. And you can see both of those today, and you can see good things being used in bad ways, so that there are lots of side effects that aren't good. And so for us, we always try to anticipate not only the great things that people can do with our products, but the things that might not be so good, and try to build some construct around those to eliminate or minimize those. An example of that is screen time. And so for folks that have kids in here, lots of parents told us, hey, my son or daughter is spending too much time on the phone, and I don't want to constantly police it myself, but I do want to police it. And so we built a tool around that focused on minimizing the amount of time, or putting an allowance on the amount of time you spend in certain apps, if a child is very young, who a child could contact, who they could not, sort of a list of people that are safe, or family members or friends or so forth. And we've done a lot of that, and we also made it available for you and I, because we might also spend too much time. Or maybe we spend the right amount of time, but we pick up our phone too much and get distracted and are not in the moment with the conversation that we're having. And so we try to look at all of these and get out in front of negative kind of things. We curated the App Store in the face of lots of criticism initially, where people thought, oh, any app should be able to go on the store. But as it turns out, most of the apps that are submitted for use on the App Store don't work. And so obviously you can't build a trusted kind of place that people submit apps that don't work. And so you have to review those and make sure that they do work. And you need to review those for, pornography and other kind of things you wouldn't want in the store. And so many of the issues that have come up on tech, we're quite different on. But I do think it's important if you're a creator of tech or if you're going into tech or if you're in another field, it doesn't matter in a way, it's rare that something is always purely good or purely bad. It's in your hands as the inventor of whether it is one or the other. And even good things can be used in bad ways. I mean, certainly social media is an example of something that could be good in some ways, but has become different in that in many cases of bullying and fake news and the like. And so that's something I think all of us have to take a deep look in the mirror on and make sure that we're doing what's right in that respect.
So at the end of the day, it's really a mirror on us in terms of our own values and whether we really live them or not.
It is. There are certain tools that amplify. Mm-hmm. And so I don't think we should say, hey, I was on this site or on this certain social media kind of thing last night, and I've given up on civilization because of it. Because these tools amplify what can be a small number of people, or relatively small number of people. So I wouldn't lose sight of that. I think that humanity is basically good, and that people are basically good and want to do the right thing. But I do advocate strongly that the world would be a lot better place if we would just treat each other with dignity and respect. And all too often, that core is missing from people.
And Malala, are you seeing some of these same kinds of experiences with tech in the communities in which you're working?
With tech, I think there are pros and cons, and there are some limitations with it. Initially we were receiving a bit of support in terms of using technology in our projects, but we realized that it is not possible to do it everywhere. It is working in some communities, in some countries where they have access to electricity and access, they understand English language and they know how to use the app and there's somebody guiding them. But if in an area where they do not have access to electricity and the organizations and the teachers are not familiar with how to use that technology for education, then it's difficult. I think you need to do more preliminary work for that. So in terms of our projects, I think we're still learning. I think this is as technology is developing, we are also at the same time developing ways and learning how we can use it best. So it's it's still at the kind of early stage, but yeah, I think screen time helps. So thank you.
I remember, I'll just say this, when one of our daughters actually saw her screen time when it first came out, and she swore off it after that. Of course, it only lasted so long, but she's...
everybody.
It's an awareness.
My dad, I said, let's check your screen time. You're on Twitter all the time. So yeah,
I think it's very, very, very human. But I do want to explore a little this relationship between the technology and the human, and thinking about it in the learning process. And Malala, I turn this to you first. As you've worked with young girls around the world, how much work is done first in the human side before the technology can really be seen as a positive amplifier in a positive way? What's that intersection look like?
So for Malala Fund, we are supporting work on the ground in more than 7 countries, including Afghanistan, Brazil, Nigeria, India, Pakistan, and also the Syrian refugee region. And what we have learned is that it's really, really important to work with local activists and local advocates of education. Sometimes we can be sitting in a small room with, amazing, expert, incredible people, coming up with solutions. But when you actually take those solutions there, they may not work. Why? Because we do not know what are like the local challenges and how the community would react to those, to those solutions, and whether, are girls and families comfortable with that or not. It's really important to work with local activists, and we have been, we have champions and activists in all these countries who are guiding us in terms of what's working and what's not, and they're guiding us. Like, it's incredible how it has proven to be good in refugee camps to an extent where they are developing new devices for girls to have access to education without sort of like a lot of usage of electricity, for instance. And in some places it may not work as much, like for instance in Afghanistan it has not been used as much. Because their focus is more on addressing social norms and meeting parents in the communities and meeting local leaders and talking to the religious leaders, and in that sense, they're sort of, the technology that they're focusing on is like radios, because that's something that people would listen to more than TVs and like than social media. So I think it just depends on which area you're talking about, but I think for that it's crucial that you actually work with the local people.
Yeah, and this, what we try to do here at San Jose State, our Humanities and the Arts College has a program called Deep Humanities, and it really is about understanding that human connection and that human impact as it intersects with the technology, recognizing that technology by itself doesn't live by itself and is part of the world. I'd like to explore a little bit, Malala, with you. When we think about the lack of access to education for girls in societies, it touches so many other social issues. And as you've been working with communities around the world, how have you negotiated that tension between trying to bring change, which is often what access to girls' education is, with respecting and understanding the norms of those societies? Talk a little bit about that tension and maybe one or two of your real challenges.
If I can think of a few things, I think that the first one is the lack of quality education. A lot of communities that you go to and you talk about why are girls not in school, and one of the key things that parents and communities would highlight is that firstly, because there are not good quality teachers in that school, and the class is overcrowded, and the textbooks and the curriculum is too old, and it's not really helping girls in learning as much, and finally it's kind of lack of opportunities and lack of support after the completion of their education. So these are some of the challenges that are related to the quality of education that girls receive. And I think, and that's the reason why Malala Fund has set the goal to focus on the quality of education, because, we need a lot more in this field. Because we all know that 130 million girls are out of school, but when you look at the number of girls who are in school but are not learning, it reaches to a billion, because there are 1 billion girls right now who are not ready to enter the workforce, who are not ready to actually take jobs and show their skills, because the education that they're learning and they're getting is not quality education, or they're not in schools at all. So that's one aspect. Other than that, there's a lot of blame put on, the governments, put on the authorities and the institutions for not delivering on their promises. And for that, Malala Fund is doing advocacy work. We're pushing governments, whether it's on the international platforms, national platforms, and pushing them to contribute to education, because there's lack of funding. There's lack of funding, and if there's not enough financing for education, and if schools are not built, if the facilities are not provided in schools, then it's very hard to see enrollment in schools, and it's very hard to see that girls would not drop out of school. So these are some of the things, and then with the social norms, I think it depends on the communities, and it varies across regions. In some places, it's just the conservative views of the community regarding women's role, their participation in society, the fact that whether they can go out of the house or not, whether a male teacher can teach them in a school or not, and then in some places the enrollment is easier, but it's mostly to do with the dropout of girls, because they face issues like early teen pregnancies, which we see mostly in Brazil and that region, or there is kind of lack of opportunities after they complete their education. They do not see a way out of that. So these are the different things, the challenges that you come across.
And how do you see or do you see an impact on boys' education by supporting girls' education?
I think, as Tim already said, when we educate girls, when we educate women, it impacts not only the girl, but it impacts the whole family and the whole community. And we have heard this saying so many times, so I'm sure we all are aware of that educating girls can transform societies. I think with men and boys, it's important that we target them as well in this mission, because when we want to convince a community to give more space to girls, I think for that the role of men is really important, whether they are like the fathers, the brothers, the local leaders, the religious leaders. Their role is crucial in that, and that's something that we have been focusing on. Like in Afghanistan, our champions are reaching out to the minister of religious of religion, and they're talking to him how they can support girls' education through the narrative of Islam, through the narrative of religion, because that message can reach out to so many families to remind them that education is supported by their religion as well.
And what we see globally, we see in perhaps a different way locally. And Tim, I would turn this to you. When we look in the United States, we've been very successful in many of our communities in supporting girls' education. And where we're suffering is we're not seeing the same kind of success in some of our communities with boys. And so we will read about the crisis of boys' education in the United States. I wonder if you've had any experience with that as you travel around the United States.
The things that we're working on are trying to get coding in all of the schools and trying to get creativity embedded in all the schools, because we see a major issue in the U.S. being that as budgets became under pressure, creativity type of classes were gutted, the arts, the music, and so forth. And so we've built a curriculum around coding to address the first, and we've addressed a curriculum around creativity that is embedded in the classes people were taking, mathematics, history, and so forth. And when I go to classes, what I see and this is primary and secondary, I see the earlier that you introduce collaboration into the classroom and the teacher becomes a coach, and technology is used as a tool, not an end of itself, but as a tool to help. I see great results in boys and girls. And at least in the classes that I go to, I don't see differences in. I think that it is undeniably true. I think there's been several studies that have built on this in many different countries, is if you focus on girls within the family unit, then you get an exponential effect across the family. And so that thinking resonates with me a lot. And and us getting together and partnering on to try to take this 130 million number down to zero, that makes my heart sing to think about what the world would be like when we're able to achieve that.
Yeah, and when women are in positions of leadership as well, having that balance. I'm a strong proponent of that, and we fight less, right? I mean, we find solutions more. The Malala Fund has already done just some extraordinary work and is having an impact in the lives of individual girls and of the communities in which they live. How do you see the fund evolving over the next 10 years? And first to you, Malala, and then perhaps Tim, you can follow up. What additional populations do you see yourself trying to reach, and what additional kinds of programming would you like to see unfold?
Yeah, to talk in numbers, we are hoping to, expand the number of champions, the number of activists that we are supporting, and we are hoping to take it to 170 in the next 5 years. And we have recently worked on our strategy for the next 5 years, and we are hoping to expand to 10 new countries, focusing on the countries where we see the number of girls is the highest when it comes to out-of-school girls, and also focusing on the countries where we see huge gender disparity as well. So these are our two kind of key indicators when we decide which countries to work in, and to also work in countries where we can actually have an impact and where our contributions can actually bring some change. And we are also deciding to focus on one or two key places and states in Pakistan, Nigeria, and in India, to actually work with the business communities, local communities, and the NGO sector, the government sector, to see how we can transform a change for the education of all girls. What does it mean when the whole community is receiving quality and safe education? And we'll be exploring that and doing research on that and seeing how we can, what impact can we bring in the next 5 years and the years after that. And we are also going to work on, empowering young girls to become activists, just like my dad and I were doing activism. So that's the vision that we have. People do not need that much to become an activist. You need your voice, you need courage, and a bit more of support can actually help you to deliver your message across and to bring the change that you want to see. And I was 11 years old when I started my activism. I know that there are so many girls out there whose names we will never, ever know, but they're changing their communities. And there are a lot of young people there who are, who are building schools, who are helping marginalized girls, who are bringing changes in policies to enable more girls to be in schools, and they're taking huge, huge risks. And I want to be with those people, I want to support those people, and that's the vision that we have at Malala Fund, to work together with girls and activists for girls' education, to see that day, as Tim said, when the number of girls out of school drops from 130 million to 0.
You say all you need is a voice and courage, as if that's easy. We'll come back to that. Tim?
Yeah, I think in 10 years, the partnership between the Malala Fund and Apple will still be thriving. I think that the 130 million will be a lot less. That is success, chiseling that number down, so touching more people. The other group, as we're successful in the 130, or the sort of the re-education piece for skills of the future that reach even outside of the 130, because jobs are changing and education has to change with that, and people have to be re-educated and so forth. So I think there's a lot there because of Malala's model, and I think this is important, a really important point, is one of the things that got me excited that Malala described initially in the Oxford conversation was that she was using local champions in order to scale. And I think particularly in education, this is essential because education is so local. And not just in the countries that we're talking about, but it's local in the United States as well, right? As you know well. And so what the beauty of that is also that you can scale the program faster. Once you find the models that work, you can empower the champions that are locally with tools that bring out the best in them. And so I thought that was ingenious to do, because most people would have looked at it differently and said, oh, I want to centralize and keep control and Malala didn't do that, and I think it was brilliant.
And I will say, I think so too, Malala, so we're calling you brilliant. You're doing incredible work.
All brilliant in
It's
university.
not bad, right? But think about it for a moment. It also allows it shows respect to the local population too. We're not coming in from the outside to tell you how to do things. We're respecting and we're helping to give you support and encouragement to do what we know you can do. Exactly. And talk about that a little bit. I think this is worth spending a little time on.
Yeah, so we have yearly gatherings of our champions, and last time we met in Dubai, and it was just incredible to see all of them, coming from different regions, like from Brazil, and they were talking to champions in Afghanistan and discussing like what is working and what is not working, and what is effective in their region and what is effective is not effective in their region. It was incredible to see that. It's a new start for us. We started this only 3 years ago, but we have very kind of kept it open to to discussion, and our champions are very much involved in this, and they guide us in telling us what is working and what is not working, and and I think it just varies. Like in Afghanistan, they are very closely connected, and they are working on the national level, bringing in changes on the national level for girls' education. They're talking about financing for education. They're talking about, the convincing the religious community, and the same is in Pakistan and India. And we have in-country representatives as well. So it's the in-country representatives that connect all of them together and ensure that they stay in touch, and they're helping each other in their projects and in their work, and they can have a vision for how they want to see a change in their country. And these people were like already working. They already had their organizations, but they were all working separately, in their own communities. And now the fact that Malala Fund has sort of brought them together has really helped them to share their work with each other and to share their research work with each other. It's incredible to see that, how they're learning from each other, and it's incredible to see that. So we are hoping that this group can expand in the next few years, and they grow larger and larger, and bigger and deeper as well. And we sort of see that community impact that they bring. Like in Nigeria, our champions, they worked for 2 years to bring this change in the policy in one of the states, the Kaduna states, where the Child Rights Act was passed, and that means that now girls can get their education, secondary education, for free, because in a lot of schools, girls are charged, and the fee is so high that the parents have to give up like months of their salary for that. So these are the small changes that can actually enable more girls to enroll into schools. So they're working together on these sort of changes, locally, nationally, to enable more girls into schools. And
really seeing education as a human right, if you will, as just a core part of the quality of living. As you described, Tim, that impact of education within the family unit when girls are educated, it reminds me of so many of our students, 40% of whom are the first in their families to go to the university. And we'll be hosting commencement, mid-year commencement later this week, and it's extraordinary to see the families who come to celebrate that first in the family and the impact it has far beyond the reach. So I can only imagine the impact of the work that you're doing, Malala, on that.
I was a first generation.
Is that right?
As well, yes. So I'm one of that 40%.
So you're now one of us, and you're a Spartan.
There you go.
Yeah. There you go. I mean, you're just up the road, Tim, so we'll claim you. But this issue about social justice and the human rights, this is something our students care a great deal about. It's part of our core values. It's been here from the beginning of this university. And I think students are drawn to San Jose State in part because that value is so strong. Many of our students want to be and are engaged in addressing problems that they see around them. What advice do you have for them, Malala, in balancing that commitment to social justice, that activism, with being successful in the classroom and as a student?
Yeah, I get asked that question many times, and when I'm in university, I'm getting my education, I'm learning, I am getting what I always wanted for my life, and something that was taken away from me when I was 11 years old in Swat Valley. And when I'm out of school, then I do my activism for education, fundraising and going to the projects that we support and meeting world leaders and advocating for these policy changes and more financing for education. So then I am sort of on my mission for education. But these two connect, right? These two connect and they go hand in hand. So I know that you are all, doing incredible work and you are doing your research on different projects and, you are thinking about technology and medicine and technology and health and all these things that is impacting all of us. And so I would say that, when you are studying, in your room, in your library, and when you are working really hard, just know that you will be great contributors to the society. You will be transforming the lives of many, and society really needs you. We all need you. We all need your support, your amazing brains and minds to come forward and find better solutions, for a better world for all of us that is healthier, wealthier, more prosperous for all of us, that's more equal, more inclusive, and there's more equity in it. So this is the world that you can build, and I would encourage you to believe in your profession and in your expertise, and know that your expertise is needed. Sometimes it's kind of the sort of thing that you always have to be in the NGO sector to transform things, and you always have to be in the government sector to bring a change. Like, that's not true. You can see Tim from the business sector. I work in the NGO sector, but I'm also a student at the same time. And I'm learning myself, and there are people in all these different sectors who are doing phenomenal work. So we need that phenomenal work. We need those good hearts in every sector to help us build a better world for everyone.
And it's part of what we hope when our students leave us, that they keep those values with them in whatever profession, whether they work for Apple, and so many do, or whether they move in the healthcare space, or they dedicate their life to addressing climate change, or whatever the issue might be, that value, that set of values is always with them and guides them as a North Star. So let me ask you this. We appreciate so much your thoughtfulness and the extraordinary work you're doing. I'm going to open this up in a moment for our students to ask some questions. So students, this is your chance, and it's just for students, to formulate those questions. Wait a minute, but while you're thinking about them, I'm going to give toss one last question to both Tim and Malala. Both of you really come with an optimistic spirit and a belief that we can actually address the future in a positive way through education, that we can address issues like social justice or like climate change. What inspires that optimism, and what motivates you to keep working hard to bring about such positive change? So I'll start with you, Tim, and then we'll toss it to Malala.
I'm optimistic because of the generation that's in this room. Is that the younger generation is fundamentally different, I think, than past generations have, and they see themselves as a part of a broader world. They collaborate more. They subscribe to that age-old view of do it alone and go fast, but do it with others and go far. Mm-hmm. And I see young people working together and realizing that the sum of the parts is a lot more than the individuals themselves. I see people that really care deeply about the world and what's going on around them, whether it be climate change or advocating for immigration reform and many other things that touch all of them. And so that's what gives me optimism. It's that generation, and as that generation moves through, I think that the world changes a lot. That doesn't mean that I excuse my generation. I think we have a lot that we should offer, a lot to offer, and a lot that we should offer, and so I'm pushing along the way. But what gives me great hope is younger people.
Yeah, the same. For me, what really gives me hope is the young girls that I have met, whose stories I have heard, whose stories I have listened to. And those were the girls that I met in refugee camps in Iraq, in Kenya, in Lebanon. These are the girls who I have met in slums in Brazil. And these are the girls who I have met, when I myself were, living in Swat Valley, and I remember my own life and my friend's life without an education. So I really admire the courage of these young girls. They are sitting in a camp. They do not have electricity, they do not have facilities, they do not even know when they would be able to go back to their home and when they would be able to see peace, but they are still smiling, they are optimistic, they still have dreams, they want to become teachers, engineers, and these are the young girls that inspire me to be positive and to be optimistic. But also, I am really grateful for the support that I'm receiving globally from all around the world, from including young people, but especially Tim, who's here. Thank you for your support, and thank you for joining the mission of girls' education. And that is keeping me optimistic and hopeful for the coming years that we will see this change of quality education for every girl.
So it's really the power of the human spirit.
And support and joining hands and
A little story. Malala and I went to Lebanon in the early part of 2018, and we had a roundtable type of discussion there with girls that were Syrian refugees, along with some girls from the local community as well. And I mean, these girls had experienced some of the worst of humanity. Bombs exploding nearby, relatives being killed, their city that was once an unbelievable city being ruined, and yet their dreams and aspirations were not damaged a bit. It was a very moving meeting for me. And I think a testament again to the young human spirit in particular. It's something everybody should experience, I think.
If you remember, one girl in that group, so we were asking girls what they want to be, and like some of them were saying they want to be teachers and doctors and engineers. And one girl said that she wants to be an architect. And when we asked why, she said that, when she was leaving Syria, she saw her country was completely destroyed in front of her eyes. So when she becomes an architect and she goes back to her country, she will rebuild it. So that was, her spirit, and that keeps you hopeful for the future, that if these girls are not losing hope, we should not even be thinking of it.
That's right.
That's right. Well, with that, thank you so much, and it's a good chance now to turn it over to our students. So where is the first question? I think there are some microphones. Yes, go ahead.
Hi, first I just want to say thank you for coming to San Jose State and taking the time to have this conversation with us, and thanks for your involvement in the communities around the world. My question is, what projects or initiatives are you both working on to promote social justice issues within education, and how can students be involved in this project?
When it comes to social justice issues, I think for me, one of the biggest one is the inequality that exists based on gender. One of the biggest equalizers, as Tim has repeatedly said, is education. When you educate girls, it contributes to the equality that we all are speaking for, advocating for. And I hope that through the projects that we are supporting, imagine when girls are not educated in some communities, they are never seen, in decision rooms, they are never seen in public, they are never seen in different task force. And it's really like, they're limited to their houses. It's just, imagine this room without the girls and women here. If you imagine this room for a second without the girls and women here, that's the sort of world that you get without education. So education is actually empowering girls and women, but it's also giving them presence in society. It's giving them a voice in society, and it's giving them access to equality in society. So, that's kind of one of the social justices that we want to see.
I would pick what you're passionate about and then find like-minded people, and make sure you spend your time on the positive aspects of what you want to change and not just whipping the other side, so to speak. I think there's so much of the whipping the other side that goes on that sometimes people can lose sight over what it is they're trying to do even. And so there's so many great causes. Girls' education is a big one with us. I also spend time on advocating for DACA to be fixed in climate change. But we all have different passions, and I think the testament, I think Malala's done an incredible job on this, is focusing your passion and deciding, that doesn't mean you can ignore everything else, but just focusing on it where you put your best energy in an area or two.
Another question over here.
Hi, my name is Jesus. Thank you again. It's an honor to be here in front of you. I currently work for a nonprofit in East Palo Alto that helps low-income communities learn to code. So I'm a teacher in a coding space there. And I know a big issue that we have is that our students can't take their curriculum or my curriculum home because they don't have access to computers or don't have access to internet. And I know here at East San Jose, it's also the same issue. So I'm curious what tech companies are doing to kind of challenge that. Milano, how is that being affected in other countries as well, to fight that inequality with access to technology?
We picked 120 some odd schools across the U.S. as an example. We've done some things outside the U.S. as well, and granted not only the equipment, but also tried to put some of our team in there for professional development and so forth. And so, and then in addition to that, we've prepared these curriculums that we've given away for free. I can't answer the question about other tech companies, but I'm well versed in some of the things that we do. And of course, part of our initiative together is technology oriented too, and includes gifts from Apple to the units in the countries that we're working on.
Looking for our next question. Looking for the mics. There we go, right here in front.
Sorry, thank you. Hi, Renee Paquier. Thank you both, Tim and Malala, for being here. My question for you is, as you know, California is one of the largest refugee populations in the United States. What advice do you have for us living locally, students, future educators, current educators? What can we do to make an impact locally with the population and the people that we have here? Thank you.
Well, to me, the most pressing issue in the very short term is DACA. It's before the Supreme Court, as you know. We filed an amicus brief and became a part of this. We were already a part of advocating prior to that. We have 450 or so employees that are on DACA today. Many of those are in this state. Not all, but many of them are. And so I think that's a place to put energy. It is not the only issue with the immigration system, as you well know. And so I think there are sort of plenty of things there to work on. But I'd put special emphasis on DACA just because it's in front of the court and it's a time where influence is extremely important as we head into that decision.
And we want to thank you for that. We have about 800 DACA students here, and we have employees as well. And so thank you so much for your advocacy on behalf of these extraordinary students.
I think when you talk to somebody, thank you. For those of you, I'm sure many of you have talked with somebody that's here on DACA, but these folks are every bit as American as I am. And the grit and work ethic and love for country is so great that I will fight until my toes point up on this.
Yeah. Yes.
So thank you.
Hi, my name is Nancy, and this question is for Tim. Thank you for take the initiative and reach out to the students. Sometimes we have students in the university, they do a lot of activities, they are outside the classroom, and we do well in school, we do get good grades, and we work 3 or 4 jobs. And sometimes students, we rush to leaders that are inside the university, but we never get response. We never, they never reach us back. So in these situations, we insist or we email them, or sometimes we go to the office in person to make sure we can get an appointment, but sometimes we're too selfless in doing in some occasions. So at this point, I'm like done in my journey over here. So I don't know what I should do. Just drop it and just move on with my life. And
I'm sorry, I'm not following the.
So
these are contacts you're making to Apple?
No, inside the university.
Oh, inside the
Yeah,
university.
leaders inside the university.
That's probably a better question for Mary than.
Well, we'll follow up. How about that?
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Thank you. Next question.
Hi, I'm Navia Kaur. So I want to kind of go back into talking about the uses of technology. I like how you mentioned that technology can amplify some of the biases and inequalities we see in society. So I'm curious to know what you think is the role of government in regulating technology.
That's a very good question. I think there are certain things that need to and must be regulated. I think privacy is one of those. We see privacy as a fundamental human right, and a key building block for a lot of freedoms that we enjoy, like freedom of expression and freedom of speech and freedom of the press and so forth. I worry about a world where surveillance is the norm. I don't think that centralized databases that have all of our thoughts and personal characteristics should exist. And so I believe that should be regulated. Generally, I'm not a big pro-regulation person because I see that it sometimes throttles innovation, and there can be a lot of unexpected consequences of it. But in this case, I think we ran the experiment and it didn't work, and it's time for regulation.
Okay. Hi, my name is Sierra. Sorry, I'll stand up.
Yep.
Okay. I sort of have a question for Malala about the education plans you implement. When you were talking about going to different areas and sort of educating sort of within the cultural context and when they have different cultural standards, and I know you talk a lot about coding, but I'm curious as to how if you do tailor your education systems to the group you're working with, and if so, could you elaborate on that? Like with the girls you talked about who have different career aspirations, does your education support them sort of in their career aspirations, or could you elaborate on ways that you sort of tailor the education that you give?
So the work that we are supporting, it just depends on the region and what the champions are doing. Some champions are not involved in like school-led education projects. They are more involved in the advocacy work. So they are, pushing for policy changing. They are working on the national level to convince political leaders to invest more in education, to bring changes in their policies, to focus on quality education, and also especially focus on minority and deprived groups where we see a huge gap in the dropout of girls. And we see that a lot in Brazil when it comes to the indigenous and Afro-Brazilian girls. Very few of them actually graduate and finish their schooling. So some of our champions are focused on that, and then some of them are actually, they have centers, they have clubs and programs that focuses on educating girls. And in Pakistan, one of our champions has developed this digital device and this digital tool through which children who are in slums, children and girls who have dropped out of schools, and now they're at a stage where they cannot get their higher education because they have missed a few years of their schooling, so they cannot get back to their secondary education, and they're delivering these devices to allow these children to catch up on the courses that they have missed and to have access to education through these kind of engaging devices. So in that sense, some of them are focusing on using technology in that sense, but they're not present in a school. And some of them are working in schools as well, but they're also bringing in technology into that. So like for Malala Fund, I understand your question is like, how is Malala Fund sort of constructing a model of quality education, and how, what should be a perfect school like, or what should but I think it's very difficult for, an organization, based in in Washington and London to decide that, because you have to really work with the local activists and work with the governments, and hopefully we will try to see that in the few states that we focus on in India and Pakistan and Nigeria, and see where we can work and try to develop that. But it's still a learning experience to come up with kind of an ideal school sort of model. You can follow kind of some of the and it's hard because you can see that there are amazing schools in the US and amazing schools in the UK and amazing schools in Pakistan and India and in those countries as well. But to replicate that model is so hard. It's either very costly, it's inefficient, you cannot find the quality teachers so we need to find more efficient and applicable ways that actually work in those communities.
So there's much work to be done. Yes. I wish we had more time for more questions, but we're out of time. Shall we thank our guests one more time for joining us here?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks so much. Thank you.
Everything you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.